Um, so my one question then, after the McAvee um, situation, did it make you say or think, man, you know what? There's so much going on in this country, and everybody's focused on Atlanta and this judge ruling. Do I want to rethink me getting in office, or do I want to go in office even more?
I think you want to go in office even more.
Hmm.
Uh, Generally speaking, and we talked earlier about the um, prosecutor to judge pipeline. A big part of that is that a lot of defense attorneys and people who probably would make great judges, they don't want to run. They don't want to participate in the process. You take a massive pay cut from private practice to become a judge. If
Mm.
you are a partner at a law firm, or if you have spent your career really building up your practice, or you do civil litigation, you might make a half million or three quarters of $1 million a year or more. So those people don't really want to go and become a
Yeah.
judge and make $100,000 a year. We have to start ensuring that people realize the importance of public service, the importance of making sacrifices, and the importance that they can serve to the community. You can make all the money that you want, but if your community is decaying behind you,
Yeah.
you have to look back and see that it's just not worth it. And when we also talk about representation, when you're dealing, we talked about the demographics in Fulton County earlier. It's a slightly majority African American city, Atlanta, or county rather.
Mm.
But if you go to the county jail, almost 80% of the people in there are black. So when you
Wait a
have,
minute. You've been attorney. Sorry about that.
oh no, go ahead.
So why is it that 80% are black in jail?
It's a litany of issues, but it part of it goes to the demographics of the court.
Mhm.
I've been in court before where Tyler from Buckhead will come in, and he's been arrested this weekend for DUI, possession of drugs, and possession of a firearm, etc. And then Tyler's dad sends his lawyer in, and Tyler gets a diversion program, and he goes home with a clean record after doing some community service and going to a rehabilitation program. Then Tyrone walks
Yeah.
in directly after him. He's been arrested this weekend for DUI, possession of drugs, and possession of a firearm. And now Tyrone is sentenced to 10 years in prison.
Mm.
These are the inequities that exist in our system. And we can either stand on the outside and hope to affect them, or we can work our way into the inside and be able to fix them from the ground up. I have a big focus on diversion programs and leniency, because it's not about giving people a slap on the wrist
Right.
or just letting them just walk away scot free. It's about making sure people, and particularly young offenders, have a second chance and have the ability to reform their lives. I think that if somebody goes to prison for 5 years and they come out and do the exact same thing, that's not a personal failure. That's a failure of the system. We need to
Mm.
have programs in place that if you're convicted of a crime, that you have to go through counseling, you have to go through
Mm.
rehabilitation, but also you have to go through educational and jobs programs. You should come out and know how to do pipe fitting, long haul truck driving,
Mm.
HVAC repairs, plumbing, electricians. All these things are stuff that we need in our community. But instead, all the people are doing is you put a 17-year-old into the adult prison, and you leave them there for 5 years. They
Yeah.
come out with a bachelor's, a master's, and a PhD in crime. The only thing they learn how to do is be a better criminal when they get out of there, and we have to change that system.
So the way you're saying too, there should be more educational programs while you're in prison.
Correct.
Mhm.
Not just educational programs, but also work programs
Right.
that will give you the information that is necessary to make the changes needed. And if you don't actually invest in making those changes, then you're only going to get the exact same system returning.
And if McAvee or the other guy had finished his term, would you still have considered running?
Yeah, actually, when Judge Brasher stepped down from the bench, I considered running then when
Mhm.
the seat became available. As I said, we've had issues long before Fonnie Willis and Donald Trump, and I don't think it is constructive to make the entire campaign about one case, one individual, and what's percolating the news, regardless of what happens to Donald Trump. If your grandson or your nephew gets arrested, they're going to have to deal with the system that exists right now.
Right. And so now tell me, how did you become a civil rights attorney?
It's interesting because when I was in college, I was attended a speech by Reverend Jesse Jackson when he was speaking at Georgia State, and after that, I started volunteering for his office here in Atlanta under Janice Mathis. Through that, I met many of the civil rights heroes, everybody from Andrew Young to James Orange, Joseph Lowry, Abernathy, Bernice King, on down the line. And it made me realize the importance of not just being an activist, but of being an attorney. Being able to file the lawsuits, being able to represent communities, being able to use the legal tools. During the 1950s and 60s, the civil rights movement was very much focused around the church because that's where people congregated. So you saw reverends and pastors really being the leaders of that community. If you fast forward to the last decade or so, there really has been the civil rights attorneys leading the charge. People like Ben Crump, people like Lee Merritt, people like a good friend of mine, Chris Stewart and Harry Daniels, who were able to file these lawsuits that are pushing the change necessary. I like to believe that I was on the front end of that. And I think that now the next step is to go from simply being outside filing lawsuits to being inside making the changes necessary.
So how is it now being a civil rights attorney, and you know the history of civil rights, have we progressed? Do we need, civil rights attorneys now more than back then in the 50s or 60s? Does it surprise you that we need them as much as we have them?
It's more necessary than ever. Primarily because as we've changed laws and then we've made progress, the people who are on the other side have changed their tactics also. If you've noticed, instead of just directly talking about issues of segregation, of voter suppression, etc., now they've turned many of the civil rights laws against African American communities. So if you look at the Supreme Court hearing or Supreme Court ruling last fall on affirmative action, it very much was using the same civil rights laws that were meant to integrate these institutions and said, well, that's reverse discrimination now. So we're outlawing that. If you look at the current attacks that we see on diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, DEI, which has become the new casus belli for conservatives, in large part, they are trying to use the same programs that were increasing African American employment, increasing our representation in corporate America, increasing our access to capital, and now they're using that as a way to push back against the progress we've made. So just as we had to fight the fight in the 60s, the fight continues. They've just simply changed the nature of it and changed. We basically went from boxing to MMA. You're still doing the same thing. It's just a different strategy.
And I have said I don't believe in conspiracy theories, but I kind of believe things are placed the way that they're placed. And the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act of 65, I always felt, I wasn't there, but I always felt that once they got that, maybe the powers that be were in their offices and said, you know what, these African Americans, they're talking too much. They're making a scene. They want something. Let's give them that. I feel that they pacified them because the generation before me that, they got the affirmative action and everything. I don't feel that they came back and came to my generation. I think some of them who were in their 60s, 70s, 80s, they got what they got and they went on. Because to me, why hasn't this civil rights movement been as strong as it was since the 1960s? I mean, to me, it's technically diminished because where you're young, I've run for office a bunch of times and I never see young people run. Okay, why am I the only one that's going out there feeling, look, I don't like this system. It can't be changed. I tell anybody, if you don't like who's in office, and I've said this to you before, then either you run or you get somebody else to run. I ran for Congress, and when I ran against Max Miller. Okay, so it was big. So it was Max Miller and two other guys, And Max Miller, he came into our community, kind of moved in. Okay. And the other two guys, they were there. And then it was me. And I went door to door, got signatures. Me and my son, I said, look, you help me get these signatures, I'll give you some Jordans. We'll give you some
Mhm.
LeBron. So we went, got on the ballot. So there's four of us on the ballot, two guys that have some money, then Trump, who's got millions, and then yours truly. So in one little community, I placed third. Overall, I placed fourth, but I was 7% from placing second. Okay.
Mhm.
No money, nothing, going door to door. Did this in COVID, but I wanted to show people that if you don't like who's in office, then you run or get somebody else to run. But to have the support of that, that's sad, and especially sad from African Americans. So to me, when anybody is running for office, I give them credit and I say, even if you don't win, you may be in a demographic where it's not more African Americans that can vote for you. It may be in a rural area. It may be in an area where people just don't like African Americans.
Mhm.
I know this because I run. But then when you have a voice, you have your radio show, you're a civil rights attorney. Do you sometimes, when you're at home thinking, wow, I'm doing all this stuff and I'm doing it for good? Do you ever sit down and maybe don't believe what you're doing?
And not so much that I don't believe. I think everyone who's involved in activism and involved in trying to create change gets frustrated, as you mentioned, with with the speed of change. I
Mhm.
very much was afraid in my youth that I was afraid that I was missing out on all the good fights. All those
Right.
good fights in the '90s. I figured by 2020, 2024 that those fights wouldn't exist. And I think looking at the rate of progress we've had, we can't deny the progress we've made as a community, as a country, as a people, but we also still have to look at the conditions that we live in and the conditions of many of our communities and see how many people have been left behind and the necessity to continue the fight going forward. If you look at the statistics across the board, if you look at just with your eyes at African American
Mhm.
communities nationwide, we see the need for help that exists. And particularly for me in the criminal justice system, there are only so many clients I can represent as a criminal defense attorney to try
Mhm.
to bring them equity and justice. But as a judge, you will have the impact on hundreds, if not thousands, of cases. And being able, particularly, to help young people to stay out of a life of crime and make them productive members of society, being able to rescue people who have been locked away for half a decade without ever going to trial, and people who have been in custody for years at a time without a bond. I think that you can make the maximum amount of help from that position. And I think that's why it's important to continuously adapt and make changes as you are working. Don't as the Einstein said, which I mentioned Einstein didn't say, it's just attributed to him. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. We have to keep up and modernize our techniques to continuously evolve with the threats that evolve against us.
And so, how important is it for, if you win, the world goes, and if McAvee wins, the world goes?
Well, I think that the crucial nature of this race, as I mentioned, is to ensure that we are maintaining, if not promoting, the legitimacy of the system. I want to ensure that anyone, whether you're on the political left or political right,
Mhm.
whether you agree with the ultimate outcome of the case or disagree with the ultimate outcome of the case, that you believe that it was a fair system and that the everyone had their due process rights respected, that the people who the state represents were properly represented and had every opportunity to prove their case, and that the defendant has every opportunity to prove themselves innocent in the case. And I think that we have to put in place a system where people truly believe that they are getting a fair shake at justice. And so many people don't believe that now because of what has happened in the past. This is a fight that we have been in, whether people have known it or not. And this is a fight that we have got to win. This is one that we cannot lose, because once you lose the legitimacy of our system of justice, you've lost the system completely.
And so you also do a radio show that I think is kind of interesting too. We have similar backgrounds. Tell me about your radio show.
Absolutely. People Passionate Politics on News and Talk 1380 WAOK every Sunday, 1 to 4. We are on hiatus right now for the until the election because of equal time rules. You can't have a candidate on air for 3 hours every Sunday campaigning for free on the airways without offering it to the other side, to the opponents also. But we've been on the air for about 10 years now, which is wild to me that it's been that long. But we've had great conversations. We've had amazing guests over the years. We've had Cornell West on. We had Marianne Williamson on. We had presidential candidates. We've had entertainers, athletes, political organizers, all across the board. And the most important part of the show is the interaction with the listeners, the conversations that we have. I always say that it's a listener-driven show. It's not just 3 hours of me talking. I actually did an analysis once. Of the 3 hours, I talk about 20 minutes outside of the intro and outro. You do the intro, you set up the show, and then you go to break and come back for break. Other than that, I talk about 20 minutes. The rest of the show is really about the callers and the guests and providing the information to the community. And the same way that I'm able to use the things that I've learned and my knowledge to educate the community through radio, I want to bring that exact same ability to communicate and educate to the bench so that we are working to solve the problems of Fulton County.
And it's interesting too, because my passion is politics, but my passion has also been broadcasting, because you can get so much out there. And as I said, a politician, all they have to do is do one more thing than the other politician, and you can make a difference. So now, what has been the hardest part about running for you?
Fundraising. Fundraising. I think a lot of us, we have these kind of like wide-eyed ideas of what campaigning is. I'm going to go to the community events. I'm going to go to the old folks' homes. I'm going to go to the churches and talk to the congregations. You spend 90% of your time begging people for money. And that is what modern politics is, because regardless of what your message is, if you don't have 1,000+ yard signs at $5 a sign, if you can't do a round of mailers to 50,000 households, if you can't do phone calls and phone banking, if you can't recruit volunteers to knock on doors and print out the hand cards and the flyers that you need, and put up banners and do web ads and all those things, you're not going to win. And I think one of my opponent in the race already has $100,000 plus in the bank that he's going to be using to flood the system. So we've just been fundraising, $5 and $10 here and there, and trying to put the money together. We only have 45 days until this election. It's coming up on us that quickly. So we're just fundraising like crazy, and we're going to do a really big kick on Get Out the Vote starting May the 1st. So we're fighting our way through it. So yeah, the fundraising part has definitely been the biggest issue.
And then what's been something that has pleasantly surprised you as far as running?
The conversations. I, as you said, we both have backgrounds in radio and broadcasting. I like talking to people. I like hearing their issues and being able to incorporate that into what we're fighting for. Talking to individuals about their experiences in the criminal justice system, talking to court employees and former court employees about what needs to be done to change the system as it currently is and how we can fix it and modernize it. The more conversations you have, the better outcome you can create. And this is why it's so important for me to really represent the people on the bench, to not be a representative of the state, to not be a representative of the prosecutors, but to be a representative of the people and of the Constitution, and all the things we really believe in, and bringing that to the bench in Fulton County.
And any closing statements real quick?
For me, I really appreciate you inviting me on. I'm glad we could have this conversation. I hope we can do it again in the future. Hopefully I can have you on my radio show also when we come back off of hiatus. But I encourage people to get more involved in local elections. People get really bent out of shape over national elections. Who's the president, who's the senator, who's in Congress. But when the rubber hits the road is state and local politics. And you need to be voting for your state representatives, for your county commissioners, for your aldermen, for your wardsmen, for your and also in these judicial races. Who is the district attorney matters. Who's the solicitor general matters. Who is your judge matters. And I understand that when people are voting, you pull up, you put some money in the meter, you run inside, you flip through the pages. And by the time you get to the judicial races at the back, you're just hitting buttons and hoping for the best. Pay attention to those last pages. I really encourage people also to go to our website to learn more about our campaign. You can go to www.judgepatillo.com. You can make a contribution there. You can sign up for our mailing list to find out about events that are taking place. And also, you can follow us on all social media at Robert Patillo. That's at RobertPatillo for more information on what we got going on in the campaign in general.
All right. Well, thank you.
They want to go now.
Okay. Go ahead.
This is Brother Cornell West, and it has been my blessing and joy to be in such high quality conversation with Brother Anthony Parker of Keeping It Honest. Make sure you never miss his show.